Hey everyone, welcome to our monthly dev call. Thanks everyone for joining. I think we can go ahead and get started. So for the agenda today, I'm going to go through a few announcements. We're going to talk about V3 updates and also just go over a general overview of V3 again and kind of the main features and what to expect. Then we'll be talking about some updates to Asset Swapper, Mesh, and then finally some upcoming events that are happening over the next few months. So yeah, quick update to this meeting format. In the last meeting, people said that it'd be a good idea to post slides and an agenda ahead of time so that people have a chance to review before the meeting. So we took that advice and we forked Ethereum's project management repo and created our own. So now all of our previous agendas and slides and recordings are all available on GitHub, and agendas will be posted as GitHub issues in this repo. And feel free to comment on any of those issues if you would like anything added to an agenda. Yeah, there will also be links to the slides at least a few days ahead of time. We'll try to get the slides out before the weekend so that people have time to review before the actual meeting on Tuesdays. And yeah, we still have slots available for these meetings to show off any cool projects you're working on. So yeah, please submit that if you ever do want to present during any of these meetings. We also, unfortunately, will be sunsetting our forum. It hasn't quite gotten as much usage as we've liked, and the types of questions that people do post on there are usually, it's like bug fixes, like random developer questions that are probably better suited for Discord. It's hard to, see the new threads on our forum as they immediately as people post them immediately. So I think we will be leaving the forum up for another month or two, just as I think there are some good discussions on there, and there's some good links to content that's not really available elsewhere at the moment. So we'll be leaving the forum open until we can migrate some of that stuff over to a new venue. But for now, going forward, if you want to discuss changes to the protocol, you can always create ZIPs or comment on the existing ZIPs, or for technical questions about the 0x tooling, you can just post directly in Discord. So actually, Jacob, do you want to take it away from here?
Yeah, so here's a bit of a timeline in terms of what important information the ecosystem needs to know. So in September, on the 9th of September, we started our security audits of the V3 contracts. Moving on to October, like today, we are publishing the packages to work on V3 on testnets. So Kovan, Rinkeby, Ropsten will be supported. Further on, we'll be continuing to finish up some packages around like the staking and some other extensions like the forwarder. So they'll be published probably, next week. We expect the security audits to be finished around the 14th of this month, with a little bit of time to potentially make any changes from the feedback of the security audit process. And then roughly on the 21st, the V3 governance vote will begin and run for about a week. And then there's a 2-week time lock on any changes to the protocol. So assuming the vote goes in favor of yes, let's make these changes, then on the 11th of November, V3 will be live on mainnet.
And yeah, just a quick note on the packages that are being published today. So all of the staking and exchange contracts have been deployed on all the test nets. And you'll be able to begin working with those as soon as packages are published. Also, the Robson testnet has recently forked to Istanbul. So it could be worth testing things on Robson as well as other testnets to kind of look at the gas differences, because there actually are some pretty large upgrades in Istanbul that will be affecting some of the costs of 3.0 in a big way, I think.
So for any more information, we're going to kind of go through some of the high-level changes in V3 and what they mean for the ecosystem, but there's more data in details in the upgrade guide. There's a full 0x Protocol 3.0 specification. And then at the end of the specification, there's basically a full list of a change log in the items that change from V2 to V3. So maybe take a look at, the first, well, I guess all three of these documents. But, the first one and the third one will give you a quick understanding of what's changed and what you kind of need to do. So we'll kind of go through a lot of the high level things that have changed with regards to the protocol in V3, starting off with the arbitrary fee asset. So you can now set the fee to be any token whatsoever. It's no longer needed to be ZRX. So with that, there are two new fields added to the order format, one being the maker fee asset data and the other being the taker fee asset data. If you set the tokens in line with what's being traded, then it's basically like a proportional fee. And this is also pretty good for matching relays, because they no longer have to try and bake it into the spread. They can just leave the fee in the natural fee fields. So that was from a ZIP 28, which was created by the community, and we've now got that in V3. So looking forward to seeing how that's kind of gets used. So there's new fields are added to this order format. So we've got the maker fee asset data, taker fee asset data, and now obviously the maker fee and the taker fee represent the amounts of their respective asset data. So this changes format on chain as well as potentially your database schema. So it's quite a small change, but at the core of the protocol. With V3, we'll have this concept called the ERC20 bridge, and you can kind of read up more information on that at ZIP 47. But it allows you to tap into any liquidity that's on-chain. So we'll be coming up with some interesting on-chain ERC20 bridges that can tap into ETH2DAI, into Kaiba, into Uniswap. Anybody can also write their own ERC20 bridges. So, for example, Set can write a rebalance ERC20 bridge for their E20 Smacko. But yeah, this is pretty much open for anyone to use and play around with, and you can do some really cool and interesting stuff with it. And
we've actually made a few changes to this since the meeting last month, which I'll talk about after we're done with kind of the general overview of V3.
So I guess the way that we enable this to actually happen is we change the way settlement order happens. So the funds now go from the taker to the maker, whereas previously in V2 and V1, the funds moved first from the maker to the taker. So that shouldn't have any, I guess, other effects that we're aware of, but I guess wanted to kind of call that out. Next one. I guess, another big change in V3 is the concept of protocol fees. If you refer back to the upgrade guide mentioned in the previous slide, there's actually a link to Peter's video that kind of takes you into how protocol fees work and the intention behind them. But ultimately, takers now pay a protocol fee, and that fee is paid in either ETH or wrapped ETH, and the fee itself scales with the gas price. So if you use a higher gas price, you pay more of a fee. If you use a smaller, lower gas price, you pay less of a fee. Ultimately, this fee is rebated to market makers at the end of a epoch, which is about 10 days. And to receive that rebate, you basically stake yourself with ZRX. So the ultimate outcome we expect from this is market makers will be able to lower their prices because they're receiving this rebate and are able to take into account this rebate. One important thing to know is that if you are using ZeroX liquidity from a contract or like contract fillable liquidity, you'll need to take into account how this fee gets paid. So you may need to end up making your functions payable or have an available wrapped ETH balance in the contract itself. If you want to know like kind of more information on how contracts need to pay this fee, then kind of reach out to us on Discord and we can set up a bit of a chat to help you integrate this. With V3, there's some new match order functionality, and I'm going to let Greg describe the new option of match orders with maximum fill.
So if we look on the left, this is the previous order matching strategy. So as you can see, in every single matching scenario, at least one of the orders is maximally filled. And potentially in case 3, both are maximally filled. However, the profit is only paid out in one of the maker assets. And in this case, that's the maker asset that is on sort of the left side of the screen. If we look on the right side, this diagram describes the new maximal fill strategy. So now we can actually pay the profit in 2 different maker assets. And potentially we can pay it out in 2 different maker assets at the same time. So what this allows us to do is it allows us to maximally fill 2 orders that previously wouldn't have been maximally filled. So if we look at case 3 on the right side, this would likely have actually fallen into either cases 1 or 2 on the left side. So now we can fill more of the orders, and we can also pay out the profit in different assets, which some matching relayers I think wanted.
Yeah, so if you're a matching relayer and you're matching 2 orders, you can kind of get both ETH and DAI rather than just all in on DAI or all in on ETH. With regards to match orders, we've also added some more batch matching functionality, so you don't have to submit match orders kind of one by one. And the behavior on the left will still remain, but there's new behavior on the right.
Okay, excuse me. Hey, this is Mike from Hummingbot. Can you explain the graphs on this page a bit more? For instance, what do the blue line and the green line represent in these graphs, and also what are the axes?
So both of those are price lines for the order. So the blue line is the left order, the green line is the right order, and I believe the blue line is maker asset amount over taker asset amount. So that's the rise over run. And then the green line is the inverse, because when you match 2 orders, the left order, you're matching the maker asset with the taker asset of the right order. So I should note as well that if you check out the Zeep, we have a legend for these as well.
I'll get the Zeep number up in a second, yeah.
Yeah. And it might add some context to this, but basically the blue one is the left order and the green one is the right order. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll add it to the slides, but it's Zeep 40 if you
Zeep 40, yeah.
Pull that up.
All right, I'll check out the Zeep for more details.
We also have the equations there, which should help. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
So we have added, I guess, EIP 1271, which was a EIP kind of created from our previous signature implementation. So contracts can be makers, and we can validate that a signature was made during settlement. So EIP 1271 kind of originated from what we had, but I guess now our implementation has diverged from what the EIP ended out to be. So we basically are keeping support for the old signature types, but also adding a new signature type for EIP 1271. And it kind of looks like this. So you basically get the entire amount of data and the signature, and the contract then needs to figure out if it's a valid signature. And at the end, it needs to return a magic value rather than a Boolean. And that magic value is kind of explained in the documentation there. But the data contains basically the entire order, as well as a little bit more helpful information. So a contract can look at the order and check any other on-chain state to, I guess, determine whether this order is still valid. And we also made a change in V3 where the order constantly gets revalidated. So previously in V2 it would only be validated once and assumed to be valid forever. But when you're using the 1271 wallet signature here, the order gets validated over and over again every time it gets filled. So the contract has the ability to check price oracles. It can check what the gas price that's being used. It can check if it's been paused or anything like that. So we can start to see, I guess, pretty interesting use cases of market making via a contract and what that can unlock. I guess there's a little bit of information about the data if you want to kind of dig into it, but the data is also pre-pended with like a bytes for that tells you what the data is, because it could be an order, it could be a 0x transaction, it could be a 0x vote, or it could also be something entirely unrelated to 0x if this contract is being used in a different context. So we've decided to prepend our data with a bytes for that tells you what this thing is and how to validate it. We have decided to deprecate market buy orders and market sell orders. We've always had the no-throw variants that existed in V2. They actually were better to use because market buy orders and market sell orders would kind of blow up in your face if one of the orders was expired or cancelled. So the no-throw functionality still exists. So if you were historically using market buy or market sell, just move over to the no-throw variant. We have also introduced a market buy orders fill or kill. So that behaves similarly to the no-throw of the market buy and sell, but it will ensure that you get the specified amount of tokens purchased, or it will ensure that the sell variant sells exactly that amount of tokens. So you can make some guarantees like, if I call this function, I'm going to get exactly 5,000 DAI or more, or I'm going to sell exactly 5,000 DAI. So it'll also, skip past the unfillable expired stuff and move on to the next order. So definitely a UX improvement in terms of using these functions.
Hey, quick question.
Yep.
When it skips past an order that it determines to be unfillable, does that order get counted towards the protocol fee or not?
No.
Okay, cool.
So pretty much every single function on the exchange contract can accept Ether in order to pay the protocol fee, but any unused Ether is just refunded, and if a transaction reverts, then it will also be refunded. So under the hood, what's happening with like a market fill is it'll actually attempt to fill an order, but then that kind of the sub call will revert and return the Ether.
So in V3, we made some changes to how orders get cancelled on chain. Previously, they could kind of blow up in your face if they were already cancelled or they had expired. But now the operation is a bit more idempotent, so you can continuously cancel the same order and like it won't blow up in your face, which is important when you're like batch cancelling 10 orders and then one of them in the middle might have expired. So it won't revert anymore, it'll just cancel them all. We still also recommend that people use the cancel orders up to for more efficient cancelling, but if you have a unique use case where you need to use the batch cancel orders, then this will be a greater UX improvement.
So that was kind of the general high-level overview. There are a few lower-level changes that we've made over the past month that I wanted to get into, but I guess we could use this as a stopping point, see if anyone has any questions. Cool. So before I talk about these changes, I just want to call out that there are draft specifications of both the exchange contract and the staking contract up on GitHub. They are in a pretty good state, and I would say they're usable. There's still a few to-dos. Kind of need to make them mesh together a bit better. Maybe add a few more diagrams and stuff like that, but they should be fairly up to date. So Jacob talked about the ZIP, the ERC20 buyer proxy, which kind of allows 0x to tap into other on-chain liquidity sources. Since then, we realized that we can actually make this much more generic. It doesn't need to necessarily involve the act of purchasing an asset. It just needs to like fetch an asset from somewhere and give it to the other party. So this could be like a deposit contract where it's just withdrawing funds and then sending them somewhere. And the nice thing about this is it's just much more flexible. And one cool use case we're thinking of is creating DYDX based margin limit orders. And I know for a fact you could do this with DYDX given their architecture. I'm less familiar with the architecture of these other protocols, but I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to come up with something similar for those. So essentially, you could have a maker who has their funds stored in DYDX, and they can create orders, post them on any relayer, and then a taker could fill those orders, and those orders will be completely fungible with any other orders of the same asset. The taker won't actually know the difference, other than maybe the fact that they're paying a different gas amount. But yeah, I think this opens up a lot of opportunities. I'm sure there will be other pretty cool use cases that we think of down the line. Right now, I think the ones we're prioritizing are margin limit orders and then connections to the other DEX liquidity sources. And we also renamed this proxy to the ERC20 bridge proxy rather than buyer proxy because it's more generic and can kind of bridge, any assets that are stored anywhere. Also want to talk about a few upgrades to the asset proxy owner contract. So this is the time-locked multi-sig contract that kind of has administrative access to the existing 0x smart contracts. So anything that it does must pass a 2-week time lock, except for triggering a failure mode. So, if in an emergency situation, if vulnerability is found, this contract can bypass the time lock in those cases. In version 3, there are more failure modes. So in version 2, really the only one was being able to remove the authorization of the exchange contract in all of these different asset proxy contracts. But in version 3, the staking contract has kind of its own failure modes. So one of them is what is called catastrophic failure mode. So this is, as bad as it sounds, if something happens, some state gets corrupted and it can't be remedied for whatever situation, the entire system could be shut down and stakers could just withdraw all their ZRX. There is also read-only mode, which would be used in less severe situations. So if an issue was found that is fixable, the staking contract can be put into read-only mode, and basically any function that you call will not alter state, and the data will be returned instead. So the new asset proxy owner contract needs to be more generic to allow for bypassing the time lock in all of these different failure modes. So in the upgraded asset proxy owner, you can now register custom time locks to arbitrary functions. Also, probably makes sense to rename this contract, given that it's no longer just in charge of the asset proxy contracts, but that doesn't seem like a huge deal. And then finally, there's just a lot more moving pieces in 3.0, and some different configurations. They might want to be updated at the exact same time. we want to make sure that there are no random race conditions where like, one configuration is updated and that like prevents something else from happening. So the new asset proxy owner can execute any number of transactions atomically, whereas with the old asset proxy owner, you kind of had to submit these transactions one by one. So now it'll be much easier to like vote on a single upgrade rather than, having like 10 different transactions that could make up a single upgrade. We also talked about what some of the starting deployment values for the staking contracts would be in the last call, and have made a few tweaks since then. So the length of an epoch was previously 14 days. We realized there was an issue here with how the staking contracts interact with the asset proxy owner. So if the asset proxy owner were to submit an upgrade, and then that would have a 2-week time lock, stakers in the staking contract should have the ability to opt out of that upgrade. But because an epoch length was 14 days as well, there was actually an edge case where they would not be able to withdraw their funds before the upgrade took effect. So what we decided to do was both shorten the length of an epoch and also increase the length of large large upgrades to accommodate for that. So basically the time lock for large upgrades should be equivalent to roughly 3 epochs to guarantee that everybody is able to withdraw their funds. For smaller upgrades that are just tweaking a single parameter, I think it's, those aren't really security critical. I think it's probably fine to leave the time lock for those as 1 epoch, which would be 10 days. But overall, I think shorter epochs are probably a good thing, probably a little bit better UX for everyone. Did anyone have any questions about any of those upgrade points before we move on? Okay.
Okay, back to the ecosystem for a little bit. So you're all probably familiar with the standard relayer API. So this has already been updated to V3 with the new order format. If you're not familiar with the SRA, it was to help relayers share liquidity with other relayers. But really what we've tried to do with Mesh is actually replace some of that functionality with Mesh, as it's a much more efficient way to achieve that same outcome. But SRA is still used like in asset swapper. So it's a good way for takers to discover liquidity, and especially programmatic takers or like UIs that just want like a very simple interface. So at this stage, like SRA is still going to be kept around, but kind of just updated for the use case of consuming liquidity, not sharing liquidity. We may replace SRA with something new entirely, which has even better functionality for consuming liquidity. But that's still TBD.
Yeah, we realize there are definitely issues with the SRA, especially with like some of these new, ERC20 bridge orders, where you might have 2 orders that have different data in them, but they still represent the same asset, and that doesn't work very well with the SRA. So it is likely that we come out with something better for this use case in the future, but in the interest of making migrations as easy as possible, the SRA kind of got the bare minimum upgrade for now.
A little update on Asset Swapper. So we published V2 with a few fixes and a few optimizations. It now supports like the RESTful SRA as well as like the WebSocket SRA. So fetching quotes over time is much quicker and more efficient. So you can kind of, fetch a quote, show it to the user, wait for them to accept it, then refetch a quote, and then make sure the price is still pretty good for them. Then execute that. It now handles like the lack of fee order books for some markets like ZRX, USDC. So that was kind of a couple of bugs that were really rearing their heads with some users. There is a CDN release, so you can just import it in your browser. And there is also like a code sandbox where you can just start playing around and clicking around with it today, right now, if you'd like, and kind of dig in a little bit deeper when you're ready.
So we also wanted to give a quick update about Mesh. Mesh is going to have support for V3. We're actually probably going to finish that integration this week. Just as an overview, Jacob already talked a little bit about it, but Mesh is a peer-to-peer network for sharing, receiving, and validating orders. It also is a replacement for Order Watcher and allows you to get updates on order state. So you can get updated when an order is filled, canceled, or expired. Market makers can use Mesh to share orders with everybody in the ecosystem all at once. Takers can use Mesh as a source to pool liquidity. And Mesh replaces SRA for the purposes of sharing orders around, although, like Jacob mentioned, SRA is still going to be around in some form. So we had originally set a release date for the end of September for the production version of Mesh. We're pushing that back to the end of October for two main reasons. One, we had to spend a lot of engineering resources getting ready for the V3 launch and doing integration there. We also want to make sure that we spend extra time hardening Mesh against a variety of DDoS attacks and things that could slow down and take down the network. So the new release date is the end of October. At that point in time, we're going to be comfortable with people in the ecosystem relying on Mesh for their liquidity. Browser support has been implemented in Mesh, so we want to set expectations correctly. There's still a lot of caveats when running Mesh in the browser, some issues with performance, and there's no persistence, but we would love to have people test if anybody's interested in using Mesh to do decentralized trading between peers. You can start testing today.
A couple upcoming events. So DevCon is about a week from today. Handful of us will be there. So if anyone's coming, yeah, feel free to hit us up, text us, email us, whatever. We are happy to set up a meeting. If not, we can also just see you around. I know there are definitely a lot of informal meetings that happen while people are there. Also on October 8th in Osaka, there will be a DeFi Assemble meetup where we'll be presenting along with Hummingbot and IM Token. And then on October 30th in San Francisco, we will be participating in SF Blockchain Week, and we'll have our own meetup there. And then I will be speaking on November 1st as part of SF Blockchain Week as well. So that is actually all we have on the agenda today. Did anyone have any questions about anything?
Yeah, on 0x Mesh, when it goes live, do you expect it to be optimized, efficient for the users already?
So it depends on what you mean. There are a lot of users of Mesh, and people use it in different ways. Mesh can be run in standalone mode, so you typically spin up, like an EC2 instance and communicate with it over RPC. That use case we feel is already pretty solid. There are a few bugs to work out, but in terms of performance and reliability, we're fairly happy with that. For running Mesh in the browser, we expect that there are still going to be some performance limitations by the end of October, but it is something that we're going to be working on going into Q4.
Yeah, I think what's likely also to get around some of these performance hurdles is that people will run Mesh gateways. They could potentially cache a lot of extra data and stuff like that, similar to what IPFS does. But yeah, I would definitely encourage everyone to play around with Mesh as well because it is usable today.
And we're looking for more beta testers. So there's a guide in the slides here, and you can always reach out to us on Discord if you have any questions. We want to make Mesh really good for everyone, and the more people that test, the better it can be.
Sorry if you answered this earlier, I had to join late. Are the V3 contracts up on the testnets, and how can I find them?
Yes, so I believe we are publishing packages today with all the contract addresses. If you absolutely can't wait for that, the addresses are up in a PR somewhere. They are live on all the testnets right now except for Robston. Yeah, it was kind of funny, but I don't know if people are paying attention to what happened to Robston, but they had some issues updating to the Istanbul hard fork, and this happened like literally at the exact moment that we were deploying to the Robston testnet. So there was actually a large reorg that ended up causing a huge chain of failed transactions, even though we thought that everything was actually deployed and configured correctly before then. So the contract addresses for Robston will not be changing, but they are not correctly configured right now. But that should be happening probably within the next 24 hours.
Okay, great. Was wondering about Robston. Thank you.
Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I guess we will end it early then today. Hopefully see some of you at DevCon.